they had a really, I think, deep connection because they watched me grow up. So when I would come back home, a lot of the kids who watched me play in high school, they was the kids now out on the block. You know, they was the kids now running around the city, and some of them being knuckleheads in school. So when I would drive down the street, I always came back, stay with my grandma, and they be standing on the corner throwing it up. Yo, what up? D back in town. They would always walk by the crib and holler at me. Um, they would always ask me like, what was life like, over there? What was it like, man? You was in the same locker room with Peyton Manning and Mike Vick, and what was it like being around all these guys and playing at Penn State? I would always just tell them like, no, it's so much bigger than what you see on TV. But I knew if I can make it, like, you can too. So when I got hurt and I was on injured reserve with the Colts, since they were still paying me, they was like, you got to go to therapy and you got to do this and do that for 8 hours a day. So I would be there training and going through all this rehab and testing. And at the end of every therapy session, they would do ultrasound on my scars on my hips. And I was always one to take a lot of notes. And I would just sit there and just write, and really journal. And one day I was just thinking about all the things that happened to me in my life. And I was sitting there like, man, like, my career could be over. It ain't even really get started yet. Like, I'm just like going into my second year and I'm sitting here like all banged up. Like, what am I gonna do? And so on the left side of the paper, I began to write down all the negative things that happened to me, from the drugs and violence, that I grew up around, some of the hopelessness and insecurities and, not having positive male role models and all that. On the right side, I wrote down all the positive things that happened to me, because at some point there were people who came in my life and helped me, being able to leave, go to college, meet people like you, like from all different walks of life who I could relate to and made it. Just meeting business owners and traveling the world, and all the relationships I had built, just through life. And then, I began to think like, that saying like, man, I wish I knew back then what I know now.
Right.
And we have all said that to ourselves. And I began to think about like, my life was crazy, but like, if there was some things I would have known back in the day, it could have been a little bit easier. So, when I was trying to raise my brother and my sister, man, in the fourth grade, like, I remember I used to steal from the store. And I wasn't trying to be tough or cool. I was just trying to take food home to them. And I remember saying to myself, like, man, like, what if there was a place where kids could get fed, because it was a time where I got caught and ran out, and it could have just really ended up bad for me. And I was like, man, what if there was that place so kids wouldn't have to feel the need to go in and steal and do something to somebody just so they can eat? When I decided that I wanted football to kind of be my way out and understood the importance of education, I remember being up till 2, 3 in the morning trying to figure out my homework and figure out projects. Like, my grandma couldn't help me. So I just, remember going, you know what, like, what if there was a place that could help kids with their homework and help them with their work? Because when we was young growing up and the teacher used to ask a question, we used to all raise our hand. Ooh, pick me, pick me. But at some point we used to say, I don't care. When the reality is we didn't know. So what if there was a place that can help young people, from an educational perspective, so they can be confident and then go back in the classroom and begin to raise their hand again and be sure about, what they know. And then last but not least, my junior year, I began to get recruited. And, and you've been through this. They had all the top colleges would come in like second, third period and pull me out of class. And all the kids in the class would envy me because I had all these coaches and people who they see on TV coming and pull me out of class. What they didn't realize was I was scared to death. I had nobody around me who had this experience. I didn't know what a major was. I didn't know what a big school, a small school, a black school, a technical school. I didn't know none of that. And I had all these people telling me stuff. I'm supposed to come here, I'm supposed to do this, and didn't know what to do. So I was like, you know what? What if there was a place where young people can put their feet at a young age on college campuses, and they can learn about majors, they can learn about different businesses and occupations, so that by the time they graduate, they know exactly what they want to be. And as I started looking back through my notes, I was like, man, what is you doing? And it was like, you know what? You inspiring their mind. And that's how the name came. I started with 4 kids, man, just meeting with them in McDonald's because their parents was like, yo, can you holler at my son? Can you holler at my daughter? We would just sit there and talk about life when I would be back in town. And then it went from 1 hour, maybe a month, to 2 hours. And I started saying, bring your homework with you. So we sit there, we do homework for an hour, and then we just talk about life. Next thing you know, they start saying, yo, can I bring my siblings? Can I bring my friends? And one day, one of the kids was like, yo, D, I want to go to college. Can you help me? And that's when I knew we had something.
So you went from 4 to 5 kids on a month to how many now? How many kids do you work with now? And how big how many facilities do you have?
Yeah, so we now here in Warren, we now work with over 450 kids a year. So far, we've worked with over 4,000 kids over the last 16 years. They've all went on to college or the military or started their own businesses. We also have 5 chapters across the country. We're in Warren, Youngstown, we're in Philadelphia, PA, we're in Brooklyn and New York City, and we're also in Durham, North Carolina. And we're looking at 2 or 3 new chapters coming up here soon. Columbus, Dayton, Sharon Farrow area. And the long-term vision is to actually open a boarding school for Black boys.
So where are some trips that you guys have been on? I saw on the website trip to Africa. How was the trip to Africa?
Yeah, so we the goal is just to expose people. So, for me, when I think about we walked in stadiums, right, with 110, 120,000 people screaming and yelling for us, right? And, I began to think like, man, where were them people at, a couple years ago? And I think about how we were exposed and the resources that we actually had to travel, right? And we had been all over the place, all because of sport. But we're part of the 0.001% of people who was actually able, to start our life, and, due to a sport. What about the other 99%? And I believe that they need the same thing. And exposure is one of them. So we've been everywhere from New York to LA, down south to Puerto Rico, El Salvador, Jamaica, and also to Africa. The year of the return, we actually took them to Ghana. And the following year, we were on our way to Kenya before COVID hit. So that trip to Africa was amazing. I know it was something I've always wanted to do with our young people because we come from a place where, especially our kids, like we work with Black kids, and unfortunately, we just don't see many of us in certain positions. It's another reason why Inspiring Minds is so important to me, because we grew up and the only time we saw Black people was when they entertained us. They were either an athlete or a rapper, or doing some things that ain't so good. So for us to be able to travel and them to see Black people in a different light, to see us as some of our truest forms, back down to our roots, being able to farm, being entrepreneurs, being fathers, being leaders, being in politics, just being in so many different walks of life. I just thought that was powerful.